From NJ.com, this is Talk is Cheap, a New York Giants podcast. We're talking Big Blue football all year round.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap podcast. I'm Zack Rosenblatt here with Darryl Slater. The Giants lost again, as you guys all well know. They're 0-5 now, heading into this week's game against the Washington football team. I'm curious to see who slips up first in terms of calling them their old name, but they are the Washington football team. And but yeah, before we get into looking ahead and all that stuff, I got to remind you guys to subscribe if you aren't already. We're on all the podcast apps. Leave us some reviews, leave us some comments, and we'll try and get to them on future episodes. But we'll start off by looking back at that Cowboys game a little bit. Giants very much had a chance to win that game. I think it's their third game this year. They had a chance to win or tie at the very end, and they couldn't pull it off. As I ask every week, Darryl, what'd you think at the end of that game, and after we talked to everybody, and now that we have a few days, what were your thoughts after that game, and when they fell to 0-5?
Well, I mean, it's pretty apparent that the talent issues that they have on defense, and you kind of wrote about it earlier this week, you did, about some of the guys that were out there on the field for that last drive for the Cowboys, and then it just goes to show how depleted the Giants are defensively in terms of not just guys who are injured or guys who didn't work out for them like DeAndre Baker or whatever. But look, I mean, they didn't draft well enough to even have quality depth at these positions, and this is what happens. I think offensively, Daniel Jones gets the ball back in a tie game with a chance to go down the field and win the game with about 150 left, and the drive just fizzles, and he just doesn't. These things start to pile up, and you wonder about him. I know he's done it before, and he did it in Tampa last year, and but. Look, they got lucky in that game too to win, as everyone remembers. Yeah. So, yeah, the questions continue to linger about him, and certainly the questions continue to linger coming out of that game about just how far away this defense is talent-wise. I think the coaching staff's done a pretty good job, all things considered, when you look at the names of the guys out there.
Yeah, I mean, jumping off your point, so I wrote a story just about how basically, if based on some of the guys they had out there, what more could you expect than them giving up, 27 points or whatever it was technically, because the Cowboys scored on a strip sack. And the thesis around it, was centered around Ryan Lewis, who is their starting, their clear-cut number 2 starting cornerback, which is insane when you think, number one, that he wasn't even with the team a little over a month ago. Number two, he's been on 7 rosters in 3 years, and he's only 26 years old. This dude has just bounced around. He's been on 3 teams since the start of this offseason, and he's the clear-cut starting number 2 cornerback for the Giants right now. For now, at least, they've shuffled through Corey Ballantyne and Isaac Yiadom, and they have a guy named Madre Harper who I'd never heard of until they claimed him off the Raiders practice squad recently. So, I mean, and that's a complicated position. Obviously, they deserve criticism, certainly, but they expected to have DeAndre Baker there. They expected to have Sam Beal, and they lost both of those guys. And so they were basically that James Bradbury and then all the schlock that they're putting out there. And at the end of the day, Ryan Lewis was the one covering Michael Gallup on the game-ending reception, essentially. It was an amazing catch. I don't think Ryan Lewis could have done anything differently necessarily, but the fact that he was the one that had to be there kind of said everything about what happened. And yeah, like you said, even if it just says something that even if the Giants are playing their very best, which they probably had their best game top to bottom, look at how many points they scored, the turnovers they caused, all of that. They were at their very best, and they couldn't close it out just because the talent deficit was just too great. And that was even with the Cowboys losing Dak Prescott, and seemingly they were emotionally drained when they see their quarterback, mess his ankle up the way he did, and Andy Dalton come in, who's a capable quarterback and all that. But it just kind of goes to show you that they're not going to win any games unless the other team just doesn't show up, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to luck into a lot of any wins that they have, and they're going to have to hope they play their best against, bad teams, and they're playing a bad team on Sunday. So that's sort of where they're at right now.
Yeah, and I guess coming out of the game, I think one of the biggest takeaways I had that's not maybe the same as we've had every week is something that you and I have pretty deeply researched. We talked to a bunch of people and around the league and some experts and former Giants and all that about Andrew Thomas. I think it's reached the stage where it's fair to be concerned. It's another complicated discussion just because it was a weird offseason. Offensive linemen, I think in particular, need that. But then at the same time, you're looking at the other rookie offensive linemen that were drafted around the same time: Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, and Jedrick Wills. They all have been quite good for their teams. And Andrew Thomas leads the NFL in pressures given up, according to Pro Football Focus, and it's like 7 more than the next guy. He's one of the worst pass blocking grades. He has some of the worst pass blocking efficiency. Like, just top to bottom, he's been miserable over the last few weeks, and he was particularly bad this last week. I think he gave up 9 pressures in a single game, which is really bad. And this fan base is probably having some PTSD about Eric Flowers. I think Andrew Thomas probably has a better head on his shoulders. I think the coaching staff likes how hard he works and how much he wants to get better. But you know, he's not good, and it doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help the rest of the offensive line is bad, but he's kind of the guy they need to be their like cornerstone going forward. The other 4 guys, it wouldn't be surprised me if none of them were starting on this team 2 years from now, but they need Andrew Thomas to be that guy 2 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, that when you invest a number 4 overall pick in the left tackle, that's what you're expecting, and he hasn't lived up to it so far. And I think we talked to some guys, some experts about this topic, and we'll have a story about it later in the week. And one guy we talked to said is, look, I'm more surprised he's talking about himself that these other offensive tackles as rookies are playing well as opposed to Thomas not playing well. He expected all these guys to struggle, and it's not really surprising to a lot of people that Thomas is struggling, considering the lack of practice time and all that. Another thing to consider is Andrew Thomas playing next to Will Hernandez and Nick Gates, and you're talking about an inexperienced center who's not really probably doing a lot to help that line, and Will Hernandez is probably a middle of the road guard who's still young and maybe doesn't recognize things as well as a veteran guard would to help out a rookie left tackle. So a lot of things working against Andrew Thomas. He certainly has the athleticism and the physical tools to be a really good left tackle, but a lot of guys have those tools and can't put it together. So let's see if he's more coachable than Eric Flowers. I think the guys we talked to don't think he's going to go down that road in terms of being a bust. But there's a lot of middle ground between being that as bad as Eric Flowers was and being, say, Orlando Pace or something like that.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the questions just from talking to these people is a lot of the stuff that were questions that he had like coming out of college. It was stuff that like it was his hand placement. It was oversetting on the outside, and guys are they're in the NFL. You can't make those mistakes and leave an opening because he's playing against such good defensive ends that they capitalize, and he was able to make those mistakes in college and compensate because he was stronger than everybody else or whatever. But he can't really do that here, and then I mean on top of that, you have Cam Fleming on the other side who had a really bad game as well. And I think I had someone phrase it as they're the worst tackle tandem in the NFL based on how they've played these 5 weeks. And, it'll come up every week until Dave Gettleman ultimately loses his job. But the offensive line was kind of what the thing he promoted himself as with. It was the whole idea of hog mollies and beating people old school and in the trenches. And he was supposed to build his whole brand on, tough football, and you do that by getting guys who can block and guys on the defensive line who can rush the passer. And they haven't really gotten either of those. And in particular, his failures to find offensive linemen, especially if Thomas winds up not being good while these other 3 guys that he passed up on wind up being really good, then it's just another reflection of all the different ways he's messed this roster building up.
I think you remember, if you think back to the draft, I mean, these guys were fairly evenly regarded, I think, when you think of Wills and Wirfs and Becton and Thomas, and the Giants had their pick of them at 4, and they go with Thomas, which maybe surprised some people. But then I think if you looked at it, objectively, say, all right, well, I could see how that would work. But to act definitively like this guy was the best of the 4 just because the Giants liked him the best, I don't think that should be a definitive indicator of a guy being a great player. If you look at what Dave Gettleman's done talent evaluation wise, so. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't be. This offensive line has been a problem for years for the Giants, and it continues to be. And it's like you said, it's just all the more highlighted by the fact that Dave Gettleman came in promising he would fix something that remains a disaster.
Yeah, and it's not like it's going to get any easier. They play a lot of teams with talented pass rushers, especially this week, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And And so if that doesn't get like that's where you can't like hide that. You can't hide a bad offensive line.
No,
You can
no.
you can hide bad receivers maybe or a bad running back or a bad secondary you do by blitzing a lot or something. You try being creative, but you can't like scheme around a bad offensive line, especially when even like your tight end can't block in Evan Ingram and your running backs can't really block all that well either. So they don't really have an option to help Daniel Jones out, which is why it's kind of like impacting the evaluation of Daniel. He's still, again, it's like the same stuff every week. He shows flashes of like talent. He doesn't really have that much time. He maybe holds on to the ball too much. He turned the ball over again. It's all the same stuff, but then at the same time, this offensive line is just not helping him. But one more, I guess the news coming out of the last game would be that Lorenzo Carter ruptured his Achilles and will miss the rest of the season. It's a pretty big loss for them because he slowed down a little bit the last couple of games, but he was looking really good to start out. He's the guy in theory that should be their best pass rusher. He's their most talented one. They were really hoping for this to be his breakout season. Now they lose him on top of O'Shane Ximenez being on IR. So now you're down to Marcus Golden, who didn't even want to play until last week, and Kyler Fackrell, who had a pick six and has actually been better than I expected. But I don't know if you want him to be a full-time guy. So you only have those two guys, and then you have a couple of rookies in Carter Coughlin and Cam Brown who haven't played a single NFL defensive snap. And they were 6th and 7th round picks for a reason. So, I mean, what's your level of concern with this pass rush, which already wasn't that good?
Yeah, pretty high, pretty high. And this was going to be the year for Carter to break out. And, this is a huge blow for him. He's going to the final year of his contract next year, and he doesn't have the fifth year option thing available to him for his 5th year because he was a 3rd round pick. So this is a tough break for him. And he was, like you said, he was playing well, and the Giants needed an edge rush presence that they haven't had in years. So now they're looking at, again, scraping the bottom of the barrel with what they have in terms of secondary options, and Ximenez, potentially coming back from that shoulder fairly soon here. But everyone in the organization knows what a loss Lorenzo Carter is, not just for this team but for him personally. And Joe Judge are offering thoughts and prayers this week with Lorenzo Carter going out, and certainly that's going to be on the minds of a lot of Giants fans throughout the rest of the season here, as they look at whether this pass rush can produce. And you really wonder if they can. And it really stinks for him because he had kind of been underwhelming the first 2 years of his career. But then you look at this guy and see he's got all these physical tools. He's so long. He's so fast. Maybe this year he puts it together, and he kind of shown those signs. And now goes into next year with still more question marks, and the jury's still out on him.
Yeah, and this discussion kind of goes back to the point we talked about earlier with the defense. Dave Gettleman left this roster with like such little room for error that they couldn't afford to lose just about any of their key players, but especially at like certain positions. And now they've lost, they lost Saquon Barkley. They had Sterling Shepard's been out. He's eligible to come back. I don't think he's going to come back this week yet. And they didn't add any depth at wide receiver. They lost Xavier McKinney, which forced them to go and pay Logan Ryan, which has worked out, but like that wasn't in the plans. Lorenzo Carter's out, Ximenez is out, Sam Beal opted out, DeAndre Baker got arrested, David Mayo's been out, so they've had to play a 7th round pick and a Devontae Downs at linebacker, and even weirdly they kind of miss Nate Solder because that at least gives you another option if you need a bench in Andrew Thomas or a Cam Fleming. He probably would have started, and maybe Andrew Thomas starts out his career at right tackle if Solder is still here. Solder was obviously very bad last year. I don't even know if he was as bad as Thomas has been the last few weeks. So, I mean, like I wrote something earlier this week, just like kind of ranking the guys that they missed the most. I think they miss all of them, not equally, but pretty significantly. And I don't know, they just have so many holes in this roster that even with those guys on this team, I don't know how much better things will be. But I don't know. You think if they have a Saquon Barkley in here still, if they have a Xavier McKinney, maybe they're able to be a little more flexible in what they do.
Yeah, and the losses have all been major losses for a team
Yeah.
that was already thin on talent. For a team that, you look at and say they probably didn't improve that much from last year in terms of what they added in the draft and free agency, and they were still rebuilding. But you took a team that was bad last year that didn't improve a ton, and then you chop off Saquon Barkley and like you said, Nate Solder, who wasn't good but would have been probably a better right tackle option than Cam Fleming. So it would have been a Solder Thomas pairing and tackling. Cam Fleming would be, on the bench as he should be. So, so you lose Solder and Barkley and Xavier McKinney, which, there was some unknown there, but he had shown some potential. And then Carter. And so, I mean, these are beginning to really add up, and Beal or Baker both would have, for all the shortcomings of DeAndre Baker, you got to think he's better than Ryan Lewis, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
it's beginning to pile up for a team that had a small margin for error, as we said. And so this is why people look at this team and wondered, are they going to win one game, two games, no games? I don't think they go on 16. But this could be a 3-win ceiling team.
Yeah. And I guess if you want to look at the glass half full in a way, I mean, this team isn't going to make the playoffs anyway. So I guess in theory, the positive part of this is you're getting a lot of young guys onto the field. They're getting actual experience. I think that'll be valuable for a guy like Cam Brown. And, I don't know, these cornerbacks, I would imagine a lot of them aren't going to be here next year, but I guess at the very least, you're getting some playing time for these guys. And I mean, and then on the flip side, the 2019 class is starting to look quite disappointing. Julian Love didn't even play a single defensive snap last week. He was expected to be a starter this year. I mean, Daniel Jones, there's still questions about what he's going to be. Dexter Lawrence looks pretty good. DeAndre Baker's not on this team anymore, as you well know. O'Shane Ximenez, I don't think he's really shown them all that much yet. So it's another failed draft class from Dave Gettleman. It seems pretty obvious to see. And so, on one hand, like I said, these young guys are getting some playing time. You're getting to see what they have. But at the same time, I don't know if any of these guys are even good enough to be on the team when the next general manager comes in. It's going to be very interesting to see whoever they find to take this job, and if they find this job to be appealing, which in some ways it is, in a lot of ways it isn't, because they don't have as much cap space as you think they do, and they only have 5 draft picks coming up, and you have to decide if you like Daniel Jones or not, and you have to decide if you want to pay Saquon Barkley. So there's a lot of pros and cons to this job. So that just all makes me think, who's even going to be here a year from now? Whoever comes in is going to have to blow this roster up, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Zach. I mean, they are going to have to blow it up. Whoever comes in as the next GM, because this team is not close to making it to the playoffs. They're not close to being contender, just like the Jets. There's a lot of work here, and the big decision starts at quarterback. Who's your quarterback? Is Daniel Jones that guy? And that's the start of it. But there's so many other issues for this team right now, whether it's cornerback or edge rusher, or basically every position on the offensive line, as you said, except for left tackle. So it's a big order. It's a tall order for whoever the next GM is, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the Dave Gettleman talk, I mean, it made me think of, so today, Ron Rivera spoke with media, and I had totally forgotten, the whole idea that, Ron Rivera, before, the interview process started, it seemed like he was the guy everybody thought the Giants would pursue. And then Washington didn't really give the Giants the chance. He kind of went to Washington. They heavily recruited him, and they hired him before Dave could even interview him. Dave obviously has history with Ron Rivera from their time in Carolina. So I only say I thought of that because I'm just thinking of what an alternate future where Ron Rivera is their head coach looks like, because he's obviously such a respected guy. He would have walked in here. He wouldn't have done all the weird stuff that Joe Judge did, although I don't know if Ron Rivera being here would have changed that record or anything. But maybe he would have been able to get to Dave Gettleman to listen to him a little better, considering their history of success together. I don't know. When this process started, Ron Rivera was an appealing idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, but you got to remember that Washington fired Jay Gruden during the year last year.
Yeah,
and so that
got
gave
ahead of it.
those guys a head start on the decision-making process, because Ron Rivera was available mid-season. So it was really a perfect storm for Washington making that move when they did. And the Giants went the traditional route with firing Pat Shurmur after the season. And you look at why, and that's the reason why you would fire a coach mid-season. You look at why would the Jets fire Adam Gase, for instance? But there's not a situation like that where there's a Ron Rivera out there this year, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the Jets are going to fire Adam Gase so they can get in line first for Dan Quinn or Bill O'Brien. That's not happening. So
I mean, that would be a very Jets thing to hire one of those guys, though.
It would, wouldn't it? So I think the Ron Rivera situation, maybe they'd have a couple more wins, but the bottom line is, the talent base wasn't really there. It's not like they could have necessarily done anything this offseason to to get there quickly. So this was still going to be a rebuilding year. And ultimately, I don't know how much Joe Judge is to blame for what's
Yeah,
happened in terms of their
that's fair.
losses. Um, the other teams played hard for him, but ultimately it comes down to results. And no, this is not a results year. If they lose a lot, he's not going to lose his job. But there needs to start being some results next year in terms of tangible progress.
I do wonder, I agree that Joe Judge both deserves more time and he'll almost definitely get it. But like, at what point does, like, if they go 1-15, like, that's a worst case scenario. I don't know if they actually will. I mean, it's possible, certainly, I guess. But like, if they go 1-15, they fire the GM. What if the new GM comes in is like, I don't want anybody that's here from a 1-15 team. Like, what? Like, I mean, you saw that with the Cardinals. They fired the coach after 1 year, and they got a new quarterback. Like, you can't, at least you can't rule that out completely, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember in Arizona, Steve Keim was there though,
Yeah, that's a good point.
and it wasn't like there was an incoming GM, and that this is always the rub with bad teams getting their coach and GM on a different timeline, and it
Yeah,
happened with the Jets in 2013 with John Idzik and Rex Ryan, and it happened with the Jets again in 2019 with Mike McCagnon and Adam Gase, and everyone knows how horribly that worked out. So it's better to make a decision early than later, and John Mara has recognized that. But that said, that he's recognized that through some of the poor decisions he's made by waiting around on Eli Manning, on Tom Coughlin, on
yeah.
Jerry Reese. Big
The list goes
decisions
on. Yeah,
that he kicked the can down the road on. So I don't. That said, I mean, I don't
yeah,
see any way that Joe Judge, unless he does something where he gets arrested or something like this. But just in terms of like football failures.
yeah,
I think that this is a team that contended last week in Dallas, and
yeah.
it doesn't really matter, I guess, where the game is on the road because there's no crowd. But they contended against a team that was superior
There
to
was
them.
a small crowd, but yeah, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean the Cowboys are superior to the
Yeah,
Giants, even without Dak Prescott playing. So um, I think there's some things to be encouraged about by how they contended, but they still don't really know how to finish. And I know that's cliche, but I think there's probably some truth to it. I know the cliche is learning how to win or whatever, but it's more about like learning how to finish, I think, and learning how to play well in these key moments in the game. Because not every moment in the game is created equal. I know Joe Judge tried to sell that, but that's not true.
yeah.
There are critical moments in a close game where the margin for error is a lot smaller that you cannot screw up, and the Giants did. And until they get that right, they're going to continue losing a lot of games.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's such an interesting thing with Joe Judge. It's almost ingenious of the way he gave the play calling on defense and offense to somebody else, because we're sitting here, they're 0-5, and we're like, yeah, he seems like he's done a pretty good job, because there's nothing, all we can base it on is their effort, essentially. So, we
Right.
look at, I mean, Patrick Graham's getting a lot of much due praise because he has almost nothing to work with, and he's had the defense playing quite well. If you look at all the DVOA metrics, they're like in the middle of the league, which for an 0-5 team is kind of strange, especially when you look at all the rankings for the Jets, who are the only team most considered worse than the Giants, and they're close to last place in just about every statistical category in a way that, like, I don't even think is possible. But like just the idea that Joe Judge, he's not getting off scot-free, certainly. I think he certainly deserves a lot of criticism for the way he handles certain things, but like he kind of like found the formula to avoid criticism in a way, especially as in his first year, whereas Jason Garrett is getting the blunt of the criticism, much deserved, because he was a little more creative in this last game. Maybe some of it had to do with the vengeance he had on his mind going against the Cowboys. They had a few trick plays, which were negated by penalties. That fake field goal was, I'm a fake punt. I'm sorry, was really like smartly drawn up. It had Evan Ingram acting like he was walking off the field, and then he just lined up, and the Cowboys didn't know he was there, and he was wide open, and Riley Dixon completed it, and then Cam Fleming had illegal shifting. So that kind of is a bad team in a nutshell, right there.
Yeah, that
But
was a cool play. I mean, that was a cool. I presume that was Joe Judge, but that was a cool play there.
yeah, but ultimately, like Jason Garrett, still they're not throwing the ball down the field.
No.
The offensive line has gotten no better. He's not figuring out ways to scheme the wide receivers open. Good play callers can do that to a certain extent, and so he continues to just be like just a bland, unimpressive play caller. And again, like I don't really know what he brings to the table here But at the same time, I don't know if you want to fire him because you don't want to keep changing the scheme up on Daniel Jones.
A lot of big decisions to make and a lot of ripple effects from those decisions as you look at it. I mean, it's not one of these decisions will go without, a domino effect to the others, right? If you change the offensive coordinator, what impact does that have on Daniel Jones? And is he even your quarterback next year? So like there's some enormous big picture decisions coming down the road here for the Giants. Especially if they continue to lose and not show any progress. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the path for Joe Judge, I guess that's the key. Be a special teams coordinator who's well regarded, and then you can become one of these CEO type head coaches. I think the jury's still out on Joe Judge. It's absolutely asinine for me for anyone that could say that Joe Judge is good right now. That he's this good head.
No way of knowing this. Yeah.
Come on, like that is so insane. Like, what are you talking about?
So a lot of praise he keeps getting is because he does these X's and O's videos each week where he like breaks down a couple plays, and he's obviously, I mean, you've talked to him, he's a smart guy, he knows football, but you would expect that for any coach. So I don't know if that deserves a level of attention that it's been getting necessarily.
What do you think this guy's gonna be, a high school dropout? Like, I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know Pat Shurmur was the most boring person who ever spoke, but like just because he's less boring than Pat Shurmur doesn't mean he's going to be an amazing coach either.
Right, and just because he knows X's and O's, it doesn't mean he can coach in the moment. It doesn't mean he can do all these other intangible things that's required of running a program in the NFL.
They can evaluate talent, yeah.
Right. I mean, I would bet you like a high school coach could get up there and do those X's and O's things with, in a taped setting, first of all.
Kind of reminds me of the way everybody went crazy when Sean McVay had like this crazy recall. Like, that whole thing where he knew every player on the other team or whatever, like off the top of his head. And it was like this viral moment. And like, why does that matter?
All right, then go count cards then,
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
But look, I mean, you can have that and be a good head coach.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's not the be all end all determining factor of whether you're a good head coach. And just like Joe Judge, I mean, those dopey little videos are a very small part of that. And you had a good tweet with a little sad face that he had.
It was amazing. I turned that video on, and he was actually it's ironic because he was like diagramming the play where Kyler Fackrell had the pick six, and he like circles two guys, and then he does like a line, like a curved line, like showing something, and it was a sad face, and I was like, all right, well, I'm tweeting this out. I can't not do that.
That is definitely that is irony right there. Good.
Yeah, it's just so like it's like a cry for help or something. I mean, it's not actually, but that just like made me laugh so hard. But yeah, I mean, jumping off that, I guess. I mean, so the joke is that that's the state of the Giants right now, the sad face. This week, let's look ahead a little bit. They got Washington coming into MetLife on Sunday. They're going back home. Still no fans in New Jersey. It seems like there might be fans in Philadelphia going forward, actually, like 7,000 or something. Not like that matters that much. They do play in Philadelphia next week on Thursday, though, so short week. But so Sunday they play Washington. The Giants are actually favored in this game. Probably the only game they'll be favored in all year, I would say, unless they really turn things around. Which we're both.
They play Washington again, maybe.
Yeah, but that'll be on the road. But I guess I don't know how much, but that'll probably be an even one or something like that.
Yeah.
But so they're favored. And I think that has a lot of like Giants fans kind of just assuming this is going to be, all right, we're going to win this one and then we'll hopefully upset somebody else. But I don't think it's that simple. This team isn't good enough to just look at a game and say we are going to win this one, especially when you look at I almost did it right there. I almost did it. The Washington football team,
Very close.
Very close. I said
team,
like the first
when you look at team. Yeah.
Yeah, the team. Yeah, so are they the football team or what's I guess Washington and football team? I just
call them Washington. I've always called them Washington.
Yeah,
I've never used the nickname.
You're a better man than me.
Washington before and Washington now.
But so their strength also, coagulates with the Giants' biggest weakness, which is their pass rush. Is Chase Young he's a star already. He's super athletic. Joe Judge spent a lot of time raving about him today when I asked him about him, and he was talking about how he's capable of dropping back into coverage and double teams kind of don't even stop him because he's so athletic that he gets by them pretty quickly. And then on top of the Montez Sweat, Ryan Kerrigan, and they have some good defensive tackles too. So you have all these guys going against a struggling Andrew Thomas, Nick Gates going against a talented interior, and Cam Fleming on the other side. So Daniel Jones is going to be running for his life. If you looked at Eagles week 1, they were missing a couple guys. I think they gave up something like 10 sacks. It was like some insane number. And they lost to Washington that day. And the Eagles are more talented than the Giants, top to bottom, without question. So you have that to deal with. On the other side, Washington's offense isn't that scary, especially if Kyle Allen is their quarterback, which it sounds like he will be. They have Terry McLaurin, who's really fast. James Bradbury, you'd think, could do a pretty good job on him. There's not a lot of guys that scare you, but that defense has some talent on it, and the Giants' offense has struggled to score. And if Sterling Shepard's still not back and Evan Ingram still is just doing nothing, there's certainly a chance that the Washington wins this game. I wouldn't rule that out, certainly.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's as the football guys like to say, strength versus strength. This is strength versus weakness. So that doesn't bode well for the Giants. Like you said. So I think the Giants win, but I think it'll be close, and that they have to keep it low scoring.
Yeah, I mean, they need Daniel Jones to have the big breakout game that he hasn't yet. He had a better games in his first 3 games as a quarterback in the NFL last year than he's had this year. And if he was ever going to come out and kind of prove to everybody that he deserves to be the guy, it just has to be this week. Don't turn the ball over and throw a couple touchdown passes. The dude has no touchdown passes since week 1. I think he's on pace for 6 for the entire season, which I can't imagine if you look at the history of the NFL, how many, besides in the 30s and 40s where the numbers are so weird or whatever, where a guy starts 16 games and gets 10 touchdown passes or less. I would imagine it doesn't finish out that way, but I mean, who knows? 5 games in, he has 2. I don't, at some point, the other shoe's got to drop, right?
Yeah, I mean, at some point there has to be progress. I don't think he's going to get benched this year. I don't think that the idea of teaching him a lesson through benching him has any merit whatsoever. So they have Colt McCoy. It's not like Colt McCoy is going to make a difference. So give the guy the year, let him play it out, and hope the line gets better, and hope he can kind of gel with some of the skill position players and see what he does.
So what do you think ultimately happens on Sunday?
I'm looking at my pick right. I did pick the Giants. I picked them to win 17-14. I think a close, ugly win will work in their favor, and their defense needs to win this game for them, basically.
Yeah, I haven't done my actual prediction yet because I'm doing the picks post anyway, so I can take my time with it. But I think I'm gonna have them something like winning 20-17 or 16 or something like that. But so what if they do lose this game and they're 0-6? Then what do you think about what this team is and what it needs to do? At that point, does Dave Gettleman, does the idea of firing him midseason become more tangible in your mind?
We talked about this a little bit, I think, last time and then I wrote a thing about firing him before the trade
Or the
deadline,
deadline, yeah.
we kind of came up with that idea while we were talking about it last week. But I was at first under the impression the trade deadline was the 29th of October. It's actually the 3rd of November. So that's
Election
the day.
day.
Yeah, election day. And the Giants have an extra game before then than most teams because they play on Monday night. Well, that's not right. I mean, they play the day before, so they don't have an extra game. They play Monday night in the 2nd. So the Giants play three more games from now until then. So if you're looking at a team that's 3-5, which it seems unlikely because you got to beat Washington, the Eagles, and the Bucs, I don't see that happening. There's no way they're going to be buyers at the deadline, even if they win 3 straight games. They're going to be sellers no matter what. I don't know what firing the GM midseason would really accomplish. I wrote about it fairly in depth in that thing. I think we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, I guess unless they wanted to hire the Falcons GM would be the only reason.
Right, the midseason GM hire, right?
Yeah, I mean it'd be an interesting strategy if they really liked him, then I guess why not? I don't know if he's the right hire.
No, yeah, I'm sure he deserves a look, but I don't know.
Yeah, but he's not a guy you hire without talking to anybody.
No,
Or I guess if you really like Louis Riddick again, or something like that. But
right.
that's not going to happen. Is the point?
No, and I think Dave Gettleman gets the year, but it's just another nail in his coffin if this happens, if another loss happens to a bad team and they go into Philadelphia on a short week. Remember, the game next week is Thursday night on the 22nd in Philly. So short week game, chance for it 0-6 to turn into 0-7, and then perhaps 0-8 before the trade deadline on the 3rd. This is the game the Giants have to win. I don't see how they win in Philly on a short week. I don't see how they beat Tom Brady. Maybe they turn around on the 8th of November on a somewhat short week and win in Washington. But this is I mean, you look at the rest of the schedule: Washington, the Bengals. Those are the games. I mean, that's it. That's it. I mean, there's 3 games left, including this one Sunday, that you look at it and say, the Giants have a good chance to win that game. The rest of it, they need everything to break their way. So, Dave Gettleman's a goner, and he should be, but I don't know what firing him midseason is going to accomplish.
I only bring this up because I found it so funny. So you and I have talked about Dave Gettleman and the poor job he's done pretty much every week because I think it deserves to be talked about. And so I'll occasionally get reader emails from people who are still out there that support Dave Gettleman as the Giants GM. And I got this one where the guy said he sees it as I have a personal vendetta against him, which I don't. I actually think Dave Gettleman's a good man. I've talked to him personally in a lot of ways, but he thinks I have something personally against him. And he said somebody in his family turned to him and said that it's as if Dave Gettleman slapped Zack's mama or something.
I told you should have told your mom that, but you said it would just confuse her.
So I forgot. So my mom, this is a little inside the Rosenblatt family here. My mom has like alerts on all my tweets, actually.
Okay.
Or actually, no, I didn't tweet it. It was she follows me on Instagram. Actually, is what it is. The tweet thing is annoying because then I can't make fun of her on Twitter. It's definitely easy to make fun of my parents. But yeah, I posted on Instagram, so she saw it and she actually was cracking up. I didn't expect that, but it just. Keep those emails coming because I prefer the nice ones, obviously, but when people get so like personally offended by me having like an opinion about how poor of a job the GM clearly has done, if you just look at their record over the last 3 years and this year.
Oh, it's indefensible. No one's saying he's a bad
more than anybody on this entire organization. Dave Gettleman deserves blame.
Exactly. I don't see how anyone could think otherwise. I mean, his job is to build a roster and add talent. No one's saying he's a bad guy. I think he's a nice enough guy from my dealings with him, and he's amusing, a funny quote. And I think it would be pretty neat if he had been able to put this together. What kind of spotlight that would put on him is he's a character. I mean, you love covering those type of characters. He's certainly not the bland type of NFL GM and head coach that you see so often. He's got a personality. He's a fun guy to cover in that regard and he says stuff too. So
he says what he's thinking, which is pretty rare for GMs who normally keep everything close to the vest.
Oh yeah, he's very blunt.
Well, and I think that's part of why he avoids talking to us whenever possible publicly, because he's like gotten into, he'll say something and it goes viral because of how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, he can't keep his mouth shut, which is great. We love it. I
mean he's never going to live down the moment where he made fun of everybody when they were criticizing him for Saquon Barkley and he did the keyboard thing. Like that's going to be the photo the day he's fired in a lot of places.
Oh yeah, and that's like a forever GIF moment. So look, it's nothing personal, but I mean, you have to be a fool.
Exactly.
You have to be a fool to say the guy's done a good job.
Yes, exactly. Like we wouldn't be doing our job if we just pretended like it was all sunshine and rainbows for the Giants right now, because it's not.
I don't see how anyone can look at the record under Dave Gettleman and think that it is. I think the winning percentage is like 243 or something like that. And I bring that up in the context of, and I'll just quickly promote a little thing I have coming later this week, comparing the Giants GM opening to the Texans opening and the Falcons opening. So check that out. Some interesting stuff about cap space and picks ahead and the composition of the roster. I mean, if you pay a little bit of attention to the NFL, you know how the Giants roster compares to even the Falcons roster and certainly the Texans.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the interesting thing too. I mean, I think both of us kind of think there's a decent chance that Kevin Abrams gets very serious consideration, and he's already in the organization. So in that sense, they're not competing with anybody if he's the guy. And I think we both don't think that would be the right move, because then you're just sticking with your family kind of thing. But it is, they're going to have to stack up against these other teams. There are going to be other teams probably that the GM job opens up. The Jets actually won't, because you would know better than me, but Joe Douglas, I think, is going to get more time because it's not even his team essentially. And I mean,
the notion that Joe Douglas is on the hot seat is asinine.
I mean, like Howie Roseman, I don't see Jeff Lurie ever firing him. Washington that just hired their whole complete staff. So like all the teams at the very bottom are probably going to stick with who they have. But, a team like that, I mean, the Falcons already did it, so they can already start doing their legwork. And the Texans have Deshaun Watson, which ultimately, if you have the quarterback, then your job is more appealing. No matter how many draft picks you have, they have the guy already. So I'm very interested to see like what other jobs open up and how
The Jaguars could. I think that would be one.
Yeah. I mean, and if you like Minshew and they have a lot of draft picks and a lot of cap space coming up, or no, they don't have cap space, but a lot of draft picks. So the Giants don't have like the assets that would appeal unless the GM, so if the Giants get the number 1 pick, then it becomes a very appealing job because then you can come in and take Trevor Lawrence. If they don't get the number 1 pick, then you have to decide, okay, do I like Daniel Jones? If I don't like Daniel Jones, why would I take this job? Because then you're still building from the beginning because you have to find a quarterback and blah, blah, blah. So
and then will ownership even let you draft a quarterback?
Yep.
So, no matter where the Giants
How much
pick.
control do you have in the end? Yeah.
Right. I mean, John Mara has had a strong hand here. Is he going to let whoever the GM give up on Daniel? If Daniel Jones, if he just completely goes in the toilet, I mean, it makes a decision easier. But if he putters through the end of the year, ups and downs, the whole thing, Giants pick second or first, or the decision really is if they pick first. So
Yeah.
the bottom line is if they pick first, they're going to be so bad, and he's going to be so bad that maybe that's
that's kind of why the discussion about Trevor Lawrence almost isn't a discussion. It's just if they have first, they're going to pick him. If they don't have first, they're not going to have a chance to anyway.
Right, and they're not going to trade up. So it's an interesting what about, or not really what if here as we're, in the middle of October. So we got
a
whole lot
I mean, when you cover the Giants or Jets, I'm sure I
more
covered
than half a year to the draft. It's
You're
more than
used
half a year.
Looking ahead to the draft is all you got. Whereas the Eagles, they start off slow and you're like, all right, the season's over, and then they win at the end of the year and you go to the playoffs and all that, and that's probably what'll happen for them again. So this has definitely been an adjustment for me, just like knowing that the playoffs aren't even a possibility, really.
Yeah, I mean, there weren't even a possibility at 0-3, really, certainly 0-4 sealed.
I didn't think it was a possibility at 0-0, to be honest.
No, and that's the I think that there are some. If you look at this roster, I mean, there were certainly storylines to consider and say, hey, would this young guy play well or that young guy play well? And so far, we're writing about how those young guys aren't playing well, whether it's Andrew Thomas or Daniel Jones.
I think Matt Lombardo and I, before the season, one of the things was like they have a lot of like, if this guy does this, if this guy does this, and if this guy does this, but if also this guy does it, like there was like 10 different ways that they needed everything to go right for them to actually win, and most of those things have not gone right. So.
Absolutely, and there's still guys worth monitoring on this team that are worth caring about the team for. I mean, even though the results necessarily don't matter, and Jones certainly at the top of the list, and Thomas, and not a lot though. I mean, there's not a lot of foundational pieces here if you look up and down the roster in terms of guys who are healthy. This would have been a huge year for Saquon Barkley, but didn't work out for him. And when Xavier McKinney looks like probably a lost year for him. But so the more you look at it, the more you say there aren't guys who are necessarily, as going back to what we said earlier, are going to be here long term.
Yep. On that note, I think we can wrap it up here. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed to the podcast. If you aren't already on our text messaging service, Giants Extra, Darryl and I have been firing away a lot of messages on there that you're not really going to get from Twitter or even some of our stories. We kind of break stuff there before it gets to the internet when we can. So that's at NJ.com/text. I think you get a 2-week trial if you sign up. And I recommend that. And leave us some reviews, and we'll check the reviews. And if you guys leave us any, we'll read them on the next episode. We'll wrap up on that note, and thanks for listening, guys.